Marcus Washington stood silently as the younger engineers erupted in applause. The revolutionary engine he fixed would save countless lives, yet his name was already being erased from the achievement. His eyes met General Rivera's across the room. They both knew the truth. Before we dive into this incredible story of genius, discrimination, and redemption, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button if you've ever felt underappreciated for your skills, and subscribe to join our community of storytellers. Now let's discover how one forgotten genius reclaimed his rightful legacy against all odds. Marcus Washington wiped his calloused hands on a worn shop rag, the scent of motor oil and determination hanging in the Baltimore air as he closed up his modest auto repair shop for the evening. At 68 years old, his tall frame had begun to stoop slightly, but his mind remained as sharp as the day he'd first disassembled an engine at the age of 10 under his father's watchful eye. His small but immaculate workshop had become his sanctuary after 30 years in the army, a place where he could still create without having his ideas stolen or his contributions minimized. The walls were adorned with framed patents he'd helped develop but that bore other men's names, silent testaments to a career of brilliant innovations attributed to white colleagues. As darkness fell outside, Marcus switched on his desk lamp and unrolled the blueprints for his latest personal project. A revolutionary fuel injection system that could improve efficiency by 20% over current designs. He wouldn't try to patent this one. Experience had taught him that lesson too many times. The doorbell's unexpected chime pulled him from his thoughts, causing his hand to jerk slightly, leaving a thin pencil line across the precise measurements. Annoyance flashed across his weathered face until he opened the door and recognized the visitor standing in the dim porch light. General Maria Rivera stood ramrod straight in her pristine uniform. Her presence as commanding as it had been 15 years ago when they'd last worked together on the M1A3 Abrams upgrade. "Marcus Washington," she said, a rare smile warming her usually stern expression. "It's been too long." Marcus's initial shock gave way to genuine pleasure as he ushered her inside, quickly clearing parts from his small kitchenette table. "General Rivera, this is unexpected." She winced slightly. "Maria, please. We've known each other too long for formalities." As Marcus prepared coffee, they exchanged brief updates on their lives since their paths had diverged. He learned she'd fought her way to become the first Hispanic woman to oversee the Army's Advanced Combat Systems Division, battling discrimination and doubters every step of the way. "I didn't come for a social call," Maria finally admitted, her expression growing serious as she placed a classified folder on the table. "The XM-1500 Sentinel tank program is in trouble, Marcus." "Critical trouble?" Marcus's eyes narrowed as she explained. "The next-generation tank, designed to replace the aging Abrams fleet, kept failing critical tests just weeks before a make-or-break congressional review. The finest engineers from MIT, Stanford, and Caltech have been working on it for months. No one can identify what's causing the power fluctuations and system failures," she continued, frustration evident in her voice. "The entire program faces cancellation. Thousands of jobs. Billions in investment, and frankly, our tactical advantage, all at risk." Marcus leaned back, his coffee untouched. "And you came to a retired Army mechanic with a high school diploma instead of your PhD geniuses?" The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable. Maria leaned forward, her eyes intense. "I came to the most brilliant mechanical mind I've ever encountered. The man who saved 37 lives in Fallujah by modifying an engine with spare parts, while under fire. The man whose design innovations improved fuel efficiency across our entire fleet but somehow never made it onto his service record." Marcus stood abruptly, walking to his wall of patents. "You mean the innovations that made other men's careers while I got passed over for promotion 6 times? The designs that Franklin Pierce put his name on while I got a handshake?" Maria's shoulders slumped slightly. "That's exactly why I need you, Marcus. Pierce is leading the civilian team on this project. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Franklin Pierce had been a junior engineer when Marcus was at his peak, a smooth-talking West Point graduate who had built his reputation on Marcus's innovations. While Marcus had retired as a master sergeant with modest benefits, Pierce had left the Army to found Pierce Defense Technologies, becoming a millionaire many times over. So he's failed again, and you want me to bail him out? To fix his mistake and watch him take the credit? Not this time. Marcus turned away, the muscles in his jaw working as old wounds reopened. Maria stood and placed a hand on his shoulder. No. This time will be different. I promise you that. When Marcus remained silent, she continued, her voice lower. The Sentinel isn't just another project, Marcus. It's designed to operate in environments too dangerous for human soldiers. It will save American lives. Marcus closed his eyes. Memories of brothers lost in combat flashing unbidden. When he opened them again, determination had replaced the bitterness. 3 days. I'll give it 3 days. But I work alone. I want full access, and I'm not signing anything that gives away my intellectual property. Maria nodded, relief washing over her features. Thank you. We'll fly out tomorrow morning. As she turned to leave, Marcus stopped her with a question. Why now, Maria? After all these years? The general paused at the door, her expression solemn. Because some wrongs need to be righted before it's too late. And because I've watched too many good people get pushed aside because they didn't fit someone's idea of what brilliance looks like. As Marcus packed a small bag that night, he told himself he was doing this for the troops who would rely on the Sentinel, for the challenge of solving a problem that had stumped younger minds. But deep down, a part of him whispered a truth he barely acknowledged. This might be his last chance to reclaim what had been taken from him all those years ago. The Armstrong Defense Research Facility stretched across the Virginia countryside like a gleaming monument to American military innovation. Its modern glass and steel architecture designed to inspire awe in visitors and pride in employees. Marcus Washington felt neither as he stepped from the government car that had transported him from the private airfield, his weathered leather tool bag clutched firmly in one hand. The morning sun reflected harshly off the building's facade, causing him to squint as he approached the security checkpoint where 2 young guards watched him with thinly veiled suspicion. ID and authorization, the taller guard demanded without preamble, his tone lacking the respectful, "Sir," Marcus had heard him use for the white engineers who had preceded him through the gate. Marcus presented his driver's license and the security documents General Rivera had provided, maintaining a dignified silence despite the guard's rudeness. The guard examined his ID with exaggerated scrutiny, holding it up to the light and squinting at it before passing it to his colleague. "This doesn't look right," the second guard muttered, typing Marcus's information into his computer with deliberate slowness. "What's your business here?" "I'm here at General Rivera's request to consult on the XM-1500 project," Marcus replied evenly, decades of similar treatment having taught him to control his reactions. The guards exchanged skeptical glances. "Are you sure you're at the right facility?" "Maintenance entrance is around back." Marcus felt heat rising in his chest but kept his expression neutral. "I'm not maintenance staff. I'm a mechanical engineering consultant for the Sentinel program." After 15 more minutes of unnecessary verification, including a call to verify his clearance, they finally issued him a visitor badge with restricted access, not the consultant credentials he should have received. "You'll need an escort at all times," the guard informed him with poorly concealed satisfaction. "Wait here." Marcus stood in the sun for another 20 minutes before a harried-looking junior officer arrived to escort him to the main research bay. As they walked through the facility's vast atrium, Marcus couldn't help but notice the stark demographic reality. In a building employing hundreds, he counted only a handful of black or Hispanic faces, all wearing maintenance uniforms or staffing food service counters. None wore the coveted engineering department badges. The officer led him to a conference room where the project team was already assembled. Conversation died immediately as Marcus entered. 24 pairs of eyes turning to examine him with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright disdain. A tall man with silver-streaked blonde hair and an expensive suit stepped forward. His handshake perfunctory. Dr. James Whitfield, project director, he introduced himself before gesturing vaguely toward the back of the room. You can find a seat back there. We're about to begin. No introduction to the team. No opportunity for Marcus to establish his credentials or role. Just a dismissal to the back of the room like an unwanted observer. Marcus took the indicated seat, placing his tool bag beside him, acutely aware of the whispers and sidelong glances from the younger engineers. Is that the old army guy? Doesn't even have a master's degree, one murmured to another, not bothering to lower his voice. Waste of time. General's diversity project, came the response, followed by muffled laughter. Whitfield called the meeting to order, reviewing the project status with a series of complex slides filled with technical jargon and performance metrics. Marcus listened intently, his experienced eye immediately spotting discrepancies in the data that the others seemed to miss or ignore. When Whitfield opened the floor for questions, Marcus raised his hand. Several minutes passed before Whitfield acknowledged him with obvious reluctance. You have a question, Mr. Washington? The use of Mr. rather than Sergeant, or even the courtesy, Doctor, afforded to the other consultants was not lost on Marcus. The power fluctuations in the secondary drive system show a pattern consistent with resonance interference, Marcus observed. Has anyone checked for harmonic vibrations between the main propulsion unit and the auxiliary power module? Whitfield's smile was cold. Perhaps you missed the extensive harmonic analysis on slide 17, Mr. Washington. We've ruled out resonance factors using computational fluid dynamics modeling at 14 different operational speeds. The dismissive tone was calculated to embarrass, but Marcus pressed on. Digital models don't always capture real-world conditions. I'd like to see the physical engine during operation and take some direct measurements. We have limited testing windows and a strict protocol, Whitfield replied. But I'll see if we can fit you in, eventually. The meeting concluded with task assignments. None directed to Marcus despite his expertise. As the room emptied, a young Asian American woman approached him, offering her hand. Dr. Sarah Chin, Power Systems Engineer. She introduced herself quietly. That was a good observation about the resonance patterns. I've had similar concerns, but she glanced around to ensure no one was listening, challenging Dr. Whitfield's conclusions isn't encouraged here. Before Marcus could respond, Whitfield returned, interrupting their conversation. Chen, you're needed in Lab 3. Mr. Washington. I'll have someone show you to your accommodations. Marcus's accommodations proved to be a converted storage room with a cot and small desk, located far from the engineer's luxury suites. The message was clear: he was an unwelcome outsider. After depositing his bag, Marcus requested access to the engine schematics, only to discover his security clearance had been deliberately limited by Whitfield, restricting him from viewing critical design documents. As evening fell, Marcus sat in his Spartan room reviewing the few technical documents he could access, frustration building. A soft knock interrupted his concentration. When he opened the door, he found a young black man in a maintenance uniform holding a tray of food. Thought you might be hungry, sir, the man said quietly. Cafeteria's closed, but I saved you some dinner. Thank you, Marcus replied, genuinely touched by the gesture. I'm Marcus Washington. Elijah Taylor, the young man responded, entering the room and closing the door before speaking again in a lower voice. I heard General Rivera brought you in to fix the Sentinel. The engineers have been working on it for months with no luck. Marcus studied him carefully. You seem well informed for maintenance staff. Elijah smiled wryly. Mechanical engineering degree from Howard University, sir. But the only job they'd give me here was janitor. As they talked, Marcus learned that Elijah had been observing the Sentinel project from the shadows, his insights sharp despite his limited access. Dr. Whitfield has everyone focused on software solutions. But I think the problem is mechanical, Elijah confided. Something about the way the new engine configuration interacts with the chassis. Before leaving, Elijah slipped Marcus a keycard. This will get you into the main bay after hours. Security cameras have a 3-minute loop in Sector 4 at 2 a.m. Maintenance software update. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That's a risk to your job. Elijah shrugged. Some things matter more than a paycheck, sir. After Elijah left, Marcus returned to the schematics with renewed determination. Just before midnight, he found something the others had missed, a subtle inconsistency between the original design specifications and the current implementation. The difference was small but potentially catastrophic, especially under battlefield conditions. He needed to see the actual engine to confirm his suspicions, but one thing was already clear. Someone had altered the original design in a way that compromised its integrity. And Marcus had a sinking feeling he knew exactly who was responsible. The morning briefing began precisely at 7:30, the large conference room slowly filling with engineers in pressed shirts and polished shoes, each taking their assigned seats at the gleaming oval table that dominated the space. Marcus Washington arrived 5 minutes early only to discover no place had been set for him at the table. Instead, a folding chair had been placed against the back wall, a deliberate slight that did not go unnoticed by the others who entered after him. He took the seat without comment, his expression revealing nothing as he arranged his notebook and pen on his lap. Dr. Whitfield strode in exactly on time, followed by his senior team, their animated conversation falling silent as they took their positions at the head of the table. "Good morning, everyone," Whitfield announced, not bothering to glance toward the back of the room where Marcus sat. "Today we'll be reviewing the latest diagnostic results from the power modulation tests." The presentation began with a cascade of complex data slides, each engineer reporting their findings using specialized terminology that seemed unnecessarily convoluted. Marcus listened intently, translating their academic jargon into practical mechanical principles in his mind, noting how they repeatedly overlooked the simplest explanations in favor of elaborate theories. The quantum fluctuations in the power curve suggest a possible breakdown in the algorithmic prediction model for fuel consumption under variable load conditions, one young engineer with a Stanford ring explained, pointing to a graph with multiple overlapping lines. "We're considering a complete recalibration of the neural network governing the injection timing." Marcus jotted down notes, recognizing immediately that what they were calling quantum fluctuations were almost certainly the result of improper valve timing causing intermittent compression issues, a basic mechanical problem, and being mistaken for a sophisticated software error. Midway through the presentation, Whitfield suddenly turned toward Marcus, a thin smile playing at his lips. "Mr. Washington, since General Rivera insists your experience might be valuable, perhaps you could explain to the team how you would interpret these torque variances in relation to the thermal expansion coefficients we're observing?" The question was clearly designed to embarrass, using technical language Whitfield assumed would be beyond Marcus's comprehension. The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward the back wall, most expressions betraying expectations of an awkward failure. Marcus met Whitfield's gaze steadily before responding in a clear, confident voice. "The torque variances aren't related to thermal expansion. They're showing classic symptoms of misaligned mounting brackets causing stress deformation under load. The engine block is flexing by approximately 0.003 of an inch when power exceeds 70%. Throwing the drive shaft alignment off just enough to create the vibration pattern you're mistaking for an electronic control issue." The simplicity and precision of his answer left the room in stunned silence. Dr. Chen nodded slightly from her seat, the only visible sign of agreement among the team. Whitfield's smile faltered momentarily before he recovered. "An interesting theory, though rather simplistic. We've already ruled out physical mounting issues through extensive computer modeling." Marcus remained unperturbed. Models are only as good as their assumptions. I'd like to request use of a laser alignment tool and stress gauges to test the actual assembly under operating conditions. Our testing equipment is already fully allocated to more promising investigative paths, Whitfield replied dismissively before turning back to the team. Let's continue with the presentation. For the remainder of the meeting, Marcus was pointedly ignored, despite raising his hand several times when obvious errors were presented as facts. As the team dispersed, Dr. Sarachin approached him, speaking quietly while pretending to review notes. You're absolutely right about the mounting brackets. I've been trying to get approval for physical testing for weeks. But Whitfield is convinced the issue is in the control software. She glanced around nervously before continuing. I can get you access to some of the testing equipment tonight. Lab 6, after 10. Before Marcus could respond, the conference room doors opened to admit a man whose presence immediately changed the energy in the room. Franklin Pierce had aged well since Marcus had last seen him. His tailored suit and carefully maintained silver hair projecting the image of distinguished success. The younger engineers straightened visibly, their expressions betraying admiration as Pierce moved through the room, shaking hands and clapping shoulders like a politician working a crowd. When he spotted Marcus, Pierce's practiced smile never faltered as he made his way across the room. Marcus Washington, he announced loudly, extending his hand. When Maria told me she was bringing you in, I couldn't have been more pleased. Some of my best work was inspired by our time together. The careful phrasing, inspired by, rather than stolen from, was typical of Pierce's ability to rewrite history while appearing generous. Franklin, Marcus acknowledged, accepting the handshake with controlled restraint. I'm surprised to see you taking such a personal interest in this project. Pierce laughed, the sound calculated to draw attention. The Sentinel is the future of American defense technology. Of course I'm personally involved. Turning to the younger engineers who had gathered around, he added, Marcus here was one of the best technicians I ever worked with. Excellent hands-on skills. The deliberate diminishment of Marcus's role from innovator to mere technician was subtle but unmistakable. In fact, Pierce continued, I specifically suggested to General Rivera that we bring Marcus in for this particular issue. Sometimes you need the practical touch when theory isn't quite getting you there. The revision of history was breathtaking in its audacity, claiming credit even for Marcus's presence while simultaneously undermining his expertise. Throughout the day, Marcus attempted to access the engine bay for direct examination, only to be repeatedly blocked by security personnel who informed him his clearance was insufficient. Every request for documentation was met with delays or denials. His expertise systematically sidelined in favor of increasingly complex software solutions that ignored the fundamental mechanical issues he suspected were at the core of the problem. Have you ever experienced someone taking credit for your hard work while you were pushed aside? Comment number 1 if you've felt the sting of being overlooked despite your knowledge and skills. Hit that like button if you're rooting for Marcus to overcome this injustice, and subscribe to see more stories of unsung heroes fighting against discrimination. Do you think Marcus will find a way to access the engine despite all the obstacles in his path? Let's find out as our story continues. Night settled over the Armstrong facility, the vast research complex growing quiet as most personnel departed for their off-site accommodations, leaving only security patrols and a skeleton crew of technicians responsible for overnight testing protocols. Marcus Washington sat alone in his converted storage room, reviewing the limited documentation he had managed to acquire throughout the day, when a soft knock sounded at his door. Elijah Taylor slipped inside, carrying a maintenance uniform and ID badge. Security does rounds every 30 minutes in the main bay, the young man explained, handing over the items. But they only check the perimeter. If you're working on the engine, they'll assume you're part of the night maintenance crew. Marcus accepted the disguise with a grateful nod, the simple act of solidarity meaning more to him than Elijah could know. Why are you risking your position to help me? Elijah's expression grew serious. Because I've watched them ignore the obvious for months while treating people who look like us as if we couldn't possibly understand their precious technology. Someone needs to show them that genius doesn't only come with Ivy League credentials. Dressed in the maintenance uniform, Marcus navigated the dimly lit corridors using the access route Elijah had mapped out, avoiding the main security checkpoints. His mind drifted back to another time he had improvised solutions under pressure. Quang Tri Province, 1972, his unit pinned down by enemy fire with their transport disabled. The memory was vivid. The smell of diesel and gunpowder, the weight of responsibility, as he rewired the damaged ignition system using parts salvaged from a destroyed radio, saving 30 men who would have otherwise been overrun. That innovation had earned him a Bronze Star, but no promotion or recognition beyond his immediate unit. The pattern had continued throughout his career, brilliance acknowledged in the field but forgotten once reports reached headquarters. The main engineering bay was cavernous. The prototype Sentinel tank dominating the center of the space, its sleek lines and advanced weaponry representing the future of American battlefield dominance. Marcus approached reverently, running a practiced hand along the composite armor plating before focusing on his primary target, the revolutionary engine system housed in the rear compartment. Using tools borrowed from a nearby workstation, he carefully removed the access panels, exposing the complex machinery within. For hours, Marcus worked methodically, examining each component with the patience and precision that had defined his career. He discovered what the younger engineers had missed: subtle signs of metal fatigue along key stress points, microscopic alignment issues invisible to electronic diagnostics but clear to his experienced eye. Most critically, he identified significant deviations from the original design specifications, changes that compromised the engine's stability under certain conditions. As he worked, Marcus reflected on decades of having to be twice as good just to be considered adequate. His father's words echoed in his memory: "They'll never make it easy for you, son. You've got to be better than better just to get a seat at the table." Throughout his military career, those words had proven prophetic. White officers with half his skill had received promotions while he remained in the enlisted ranks despite multiple recommendations for officer candidate school. Innovations that saved lives and improved performance had been attributed to others or simply incorporated without acknowledgement. The pattern was repeating itself even now, in what should have been a new era of supposed equality. Near dawn, the sound of the security door opening sent Marcus quickly replacing the access panels and pretending to clean nearby equipment. Dr. Sarah Chin entered alone, surprise registering on her face before recognition dawned. "Sergeant Washington? What are you?" She stopped herself, glancing toward the security cameras. "Never mind. I thought I might find someone working late." She approached, speaking quietly while pretending to inspect a control panel. "I brought these for you," she murmured, slipping several classified documents into his maintenance cart. "They show the original specifications and all subsequent modifications." Marcus nodded slightly, continuing his pretense of routine maintenance. "Thank you. I've found some concerning alterations to the mounting system. Someone changed the original tolerances." Sarah's expression darkened. Pierce insisted on those changes after taking over as lead consultant. He said they would reduce manufacturing costs without affecting performance. Whitfield approved them without testing. The revelation confirmed Marcus's suspicions. Pierce had compromised the design, likely to increase profit margins for the manufacturing contracts his company would inevitably secure. The modifications might have worked on paper or in limited simulations, but under actual operating conditions, they created fatal flaws that would eventually lead to catastrophic failure. Back in his room as morning approached, Marcus meticulously documented his findings, creating detailed drawings of the necessary corrections. A soft chime from his tablet interrupted his work, a security alert indicating that Whitfield had ordered cameras installed to monitor his movements. The message had come from Elijah, who had apparently hacked into the security system to warn him. The following afternoon, Marcus found himself once again relegated to the back of the room during briefings. His insights ignored in favor of increasingly complex software solutions that failed to address the fundamental mechanical flaws. During a rare moment alone, Elijah approached him in the corridor. "I've been studying engineering textbooks at night," the young man confessed. "But having you explain actual applications makes everything clearer. I never understood thermal exchange dynamics until you showed me how it works in real engines." Marcus studied the younger man thoughtfully. "Why are you working as a janitor with an engineering degree, son?" Elijah's smile held no bitterness, only resigned acceptance. "Applied to 27 engineering positions here and at other defense contractors. Got 3 interviews, no offers. Meanwhile, white classmates with lower GPAs walked into jobs. After my savings ran out, I took what I could get just to get my foot in the door." The familiar story struck Marcus deeply. Despite decades of supposed progress, the same barriers remained firmly in place, just better disguised. Before they could continue their conversation, Dr. Whitfield rounded the corner, his expression hardening at the sight of them together. "Mr. Washington," he called out sharply. "Fraternizing with maintenance staff instead of focusing on your assignment?" "Mr. Taylor was helping me locate some equipment," Marcus replied evenly. Whitfield's eyes narrowed. "Security has reported unusual access patterns from your credentials. Accessing restricted areas during off-hours is grounds for immediate removal from this facility." "I've been trying to examine the actual engine since I arrived," Marcus countered. "If that requires working when others have gone home, so be it. This is a highly secure military installation, not your neighborhood garage," Whitfield replied coldly. "One more unauthorized access, and I'll have you escorted off the premises permanently. Am I clear?" As Whitfield stalked away, Marcus exchanged a knowing glance with Elijah. They were running out of time, and the obstacles were multiplying. But Marcus had faced worse odds before and prevailed. With renewed determination, he returned to his makeshift workspace, more committed than ever to exposing both the technical failures and the systemic discrimination that had allowed them to persist. The solution was within reach, if only he could overcome the human barriers that proved far more formidable than any mechanical challenge. The congressional delegation arrived with the pageantry typical of high-level government oversight. A procession of dark SUVs disgorging 7 representatives and their aides into the Armstrong facility's main atrium, where they were greeted by military brass and program directors eager to secure continued funding. Marcus Washington observed the proceedings from the periphery, noting how Franklin Pierce positioned himself prominently among the welcoming committee, shaking hands and exchanging familiar greetings with several representatives who clearly knew him from fundraising circles or lobbying events. The tension in the facility had reached fever pitch overnight, with final preparations for the demonstration consuming all resources and attention. Marcus had been explicitly instructed to remain in the background, his security clearance further restricted after Whitfield's confrontation the previous day. The delegation was escorted to the main presentation theater, an amphitheater-style room designed to showcase the Sentinel program with dramatic lighting and state-of-the-art visual displays. Marcus found himself directed to a seat in the last row, physically separated from the technical team who occupied priority positions near the front. General Rivera caught his eye as she entered with the highest-ranking officers, her subtle nod conveying both acknowledgement and apology for his treatment. Pierce took the stage with practiced confidence, his presentation polished and compelling as he outlined the Sentinel's revolutionary capabilities and strategic importance. "This next-generation combat system represents the future of American battlefield dominance," he declared, gesturing toward impressive holographic projections of the tank in simulated combat scenarios. "Its advanced propulsion system, which I personally developed based on my work with the Abrams platform, provides unprecedented mobility while reducing our logistical footprint." Marcus felt his jaw tighten at the blatant appropriation of his work. The engine concept Pierce was describing having originated in Marcus's designs from 15 years earlier. The presentation continued with technical specifications and performance projections, each slide reinforcing the narrative of Pierce as the visionary genius behind the program's innovations. When questions arose about the ongoing technical challenges, Pierce skillfully minimized them as routine optimization issues that would be resolved well before production. In fact, he added with calculated humility, "We've invited a former Army mechanic who once worked under my guidance to provide some practical perspective on the minor adjustments still needed." The dismissive reference to Marcus as a mere mechanic rather than the original designer brought murmurs of approval from representatives impressed by this supposed inclusivity, none recognizing the profound insult embedded in Pierce's characterization. Following the presentation, the delegation was escorted to the testing bay where the Sentinel prototype waited, its engine idling with an ominous vibration that the untrained ear might not detect but that Marcus immediately recognized as the harmonic resonance he had identified in his nighttime examination. Whitfield guided the representatives through the various systems, carefully avoiding any mention of the persistent failures that had plagued testing. As the demonstration progressed to a mobility test, Marcus noticed critical warning signs, fluctuating pressure readings, irregular thermal patterns, the subtle but telling indicators of impending mechanical failure. When the test engineer began the sequence to increase power to demonstration levels, Marcus saw catastrophe approaching. The mounting bracket stress was already exceeding design tolerances, the misalignment growing worse as the engine heated unevenly. Without intervention, the drive system would fail catastrophically, potentially injuring personnel and certainly destroying any chance of continued congressional support. Marcus pushed forward through the crowd, ignoring the security personnel who moved to intercept him. "Shut it down," he called urgently to the test engineer. "The mounting system is failing." The engineer hesitated, looking toward Whitfield for direction, but Marcus had already reached the control panel, initiating the emergency shutdown protocol himself. The engine cycled down with a series of protesting metallic groans, the sound validating Marcus's warning even as security officers grasped his arms. Whitfield's face flushed with anger and embarrassment as the congressional delegates murmured among themselves, some backing away from the prototype with concerned expressions. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" Whitfield demanded, his voice sharp with fury. "You've compromised a critical demonstration with unfounded alarmism." "Unfounded?" Marcus countered, shaking free of the security officers. "The vibration pattern indicates imminent catastrophic failure of the modified mounting system. If that engine had reached 80% power, the torque would have sheared the main support brackets." Pierce stepped forward, his practiced smile now strained. "Our colleague is being overly cautious, which is commendable but unnecessary. The Sentinel's safety systems would have prevented any serious malfunction." "Safety systems can't compensate for fundamentally flawed engineering," Marcus replied, addressing the congressional representatives directly. "The original design specifications were altered to cut manufacturing costs, creating structural weaknesses that no software can overcome." Whitfield signaled to security, "Remove him from the facility immediately. He has violated numerous protocols and endangered this demonstration with his interference." General Rivera stepped forward, her authority temporarily halting the security team. "Before we take drastic action, perhaps we should verify Sergeant Washington's concerns. If the mounting system is indeed compromised, proceeding could endanger everyone in this room." Her intervention created a moment of uncertain pause, but it was short-lived. A senior Pentagon official overseeing the program moved to Rivera's side, speaking quietly but firmly. "General, this is not the time for delays. The Appropriations Committee requires a successful demonstration today. Technical debates can wait." With visible reluctance, Rivera stepped back, overruled by the chain of command that prioritized appearances over substance, politics over safety, and established hierarchy over genuine expertise. As security personnel escorted Marcus toward the exit, Dr. Sarachin intercepted them, breathlessly presenting Whitfield with a tablet displaying diagnostic readings. The vibration analysis confirms abnormal stress patterns exactly where Sergeant Washington indicated, she reported, her voice steady despite the risk she was taking. Continuing the demonstration would be dangerous. Whitfield glanced at the data before dismissing it with a wave. These readings are within acceptable parameters. We'll proceed as planned after a brief recalibration. Marcus found himself outside the secure area, his badge confiscated, watching through glass doors as the demonstration preparations resumed. Dr. Chen followed him into the lobby, looking over her shoulder to ensure they weren't observed. I've been researching Pierce's background, she whispered, showing Marcus her tablet. Look at these patent applications from 15 years ago. Your name appears on the original submissions, but the final patents only list Pierce as inventor. The evidence confirmed what Marcus had always known but could never prove. Pierce had systematically stolen his innovations, building a career and fortune on Marcus's intellectual property while the true creator remained in obscurity. I need to get back inside, Marcus told her urgently. If they run that engine at full capacity with the current configuration, people could die. Chen shook her head regretfully. They've locked down all access points. Even my clearance has been restricted after I supported your assessment. As they spoke, Elijah approached from a service corridor, his expression grave. They're accelerating the test schedule to compensate for the delay. Full power demonstration in 30 minutes. Marcus considered their limited options, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. Lives were at stake, careers too, but more importantly, the truth itself hung in the balance. After decades of having his contributions erased, his expertise dismissed, and his warnings ignored, he faced a critical choice: accept his removal and the inevitable failure that would follow, or find a way to prevent disaster and finally claim the recognition that had been denied him for so long. With sudden clarity, he turned to his unlikely allies. I need access to the facility's computer network. Can you get me that? Dr. Chen hesitated only briefly before nodding. My office. 5 minutes. As Marcus followed Chen and Elijah through a service entrance, bypassing the main security checkpoints, he felt a familiar determination settling over him, the same focus that had guided him through combat zones and technical challenges throughout his career. The storm was breaking around them. But this time, he would not be swept aside. This time, the truth would prevail, no matter the cost. The soft glow of computer monitors cast blue shadows across Sarah Chen's office as Marcus Washington worked with focused intensity, his fingers moving across the keyboard with surprising dexterity for a man more accustomed to wrenches than wireless networks. Elijah stood watch at the door, periodically checking the corridor for security patrols, while Dr. Chen navigated the facility's complex digital architecture, bypassing security protocols with administrative credentials that granted them temporary access to restricted databases. There, she whispered, pointing to a folder labeled Original Specifications, XM1500 Propulsion. That should contain the initial design documents before Pierce's modifications. Marcus opened the files, scanning through technical drawings and performance requirements that seemed hauntingly familiar. These are my designs, he murmured, recognizing the distinctive approach to cooling system integration he had developed during his final years of active service. The core engine configuration, the modular power distribution system, all concepts I propose for the next generation combat vehicles program before retirement. Elijah leaned closer, studying the timestamps and attribution fields. Look at the document properties. Original author, Washington M., last modified by Pierce F. The digital evidence confirmed what Marcus had known instinctively. Pierce had taken his preliminary designs, made superficial changes that actually compromised performance, and claimed the innovation as his own. As they dug deeper into the archives, a pattern emerged across multiple projects spanning 15 years. Marcus's name appeared on initial drafts and concept documents, only to be replaced by Pierce's on final submissions and patent applications. The systematic intellectual theft was breathtaking in its scope and audacity. He built his entire reputation on stolen innovations, Dr. Chen observed, her expression reflecting both anger and sadness. And not just yours. There are design contributions from at least 7 other engineers, mostly minorities or women, whose names disappeared from final documentation. While Marcus absorbed the confirmation of decades of suspicion, Elijah continued searching through more recent files. The current Sentinel configuration includes critical deviations from your original specifications, he noted, pulling up comparative schematics. The mounting bracket material was changed from titanium alloy to a carbon fiber composite that saves weight but can't withstand the torque under sustained operation. Marcus nodded grimly. Classic cost-cutting that looks good on paper but fails in the field. The original design included reinforced mounting points specifically because I anticipated distress patterns they're now experiencing. A security alert suddenly flashed on Dr. Chen's screen. Their unauthorized access had been detected, triggering automatic countermeasures. We have minutes at most before security traces the breach, she warned. Quickly downloading critical files to an encrypted drive while Elijah erased evidence of their presence from the system logs. Marcus worked rapidly, sketching detailed corrections to the mounting system on his tablet, not a complete redesign, but strategic reinforcements that would restore the integrity of his original concept without requiring extensive remanufacturing. With these modifications, the engine will perform as originally intended, he explained as they prepared to leave. The materials are already available in the fabrication shop. Implementation would take less than 8 hours. Their exit route took them past the main engineering bay where technicians were working through the night to prepare for the rescheduled demonstration following the day's embarrassing failure. Using his knowledge of the facility's layout, Elijah guided them through service corridors and maintenance areas, avoiding main security checkpoints. As they passed the fabrication shop, Marcus made a split-second decision, slipping inside while the others continued ahead to create a diversion if necessary. Working with the efficiency born of decades of hands-on experience, Marcus quickly fabricated the critical components needed to correct the mounting system's flaws. His hands moving with practiced precision across machinery that felt like natural extensions of his will. The familiar rhythm of creation, measuring, cutting, shaping metal to precise specifications, calmed his mind even as he remained acutely aware of the risk. By the time he rejoined the others at a predetermined meeting point, he carried a small bag containing the parts that could save the Sentinel program, if only he could implement them. Their momentary triumph evaporated when they rounded the final corner to find security personnel waiting, Whitfield standing among them with cold satisfaction on his face. Unauthorized computer access, fabrication of unapproved components, conspiracy to compromise classified systems, he enumerated as officers confiscated Marcus's bag and tablet. You've just earned yourself federal charges, Mr. Washington. Dr. Chen stepped forward immediately. I authorized the access using my credentials. If anyone is responsible, it's me. Whitfield's smile was unpleasant. Oh, don't worry, Dr. Chen. Your career is certainly over as well. As for you, he turned to Elijah. Janitorial staff with engineering aspirations should know their place. The naked discrimination in the statement hung in the air, revealing the underlying prejudice that had shaped every interaction since Marcus's arrival. As security escorted them to separate holding rooms, Marcus caught a glimpse of Pierce watching from the executive corridor, his expression a mixture of concern and calculation. The parts confiscated from Marcus now represented both a threat to Pierce's reputation and the only practical solution to the engine's persistent failures. Dawn found Marcus in a sterile interrogation room, facing accusations of industrial espionage and sabotage from facility security officers who seemed determined to build a case for criminal prosecution. Accessing classified design documents, manufacturing unauthorized components. These are serious security violations, the lead investigator stated, his tone suggesting the conclusion was foregone. Given your limited clearance level, we have to consider the possibility of external motivation. The implication that he might be a spy or saboteur would have been laughable if the consequences weren't so serious. I accessed those documents to prove the current engine configuration is fundamentally flawed and dangerous, Marcus replied steadily. The parts one fabricated would correct defects created when the original design was modified against engineering best practices. The interrogation continued for hours. A deliberate war of attrition designed to break his resolve through exhaustion and isolation. Through it all, Marcus maintained his composure, neither raising his voice nor accepting false characterizations of his actions. Meanwhile, in the main testing bay, preparations for the congressional demonstration continued under Pierce's direct supervision. News reached Marcus through sympathetic security staff that Pierce had announced a breakthrough in the engine design, one that incorporated elements suspiciously similar to the components confiscated from Marcus hours earlier. Without proper implementation or understanding of the underlying principles, however, Pierce's hasty adaptation of Marcus's solution introduced new vulnerabilities even as it addressed the most obvious symptoms of failure. By mid-afternoon, Dr. Chin was released from her holding room. Her career in jeopardy but her immediate freedom restored thanks to intervention from senior research staff who valued her expertise too much to lose it entirely. She immediately sought out General Rivera, who had been deliberately kept uninformed of the overnight arrests. They're implementing a corrupted version of Sergeant Washington's solution, Chin explained urgently as they walked toward the command center. Pierce took his basic concept but missed critical stress distribution elements. If they proceed with the demonstration, the failure could be catastrophic. General Rivera's expression hardened as she processed this information. Long accustomed to navigating the treacherous waters of military politics, she recognized the moment required direct action rather than procedural compliance. "Where is Washington now?" she demanded. "Still in Holding Room 3. They're building a case for criminal charges, industrial espionage, security violations, even potential espionage implications." Rivera's eyes flashed with barely contained fury. "On my authority." Now. Her tone brooked no argument, even from security personnel who technically operated outside her chain of command. While Rivera deployed her considerable authority to secure Marcus's release, Elijah had been quietly gathering evidence of his own. Despite being returned to janitorial duties with a formal reprimand, he had continued documenting patterns of discrimination throughout the facility. Noted times when minority staff were denied access to professional development opportunities, overlooked for promotion, or subjected to higher scrutiny than their white counterparts. This evidence, combined with the archived documentation of Pierce's systematic theft of intellectual property, created a compelling case of institutional discrimination that extended far beyond individual grievances. Have you ever witnessed someone being unfairly accused while the real culprit walks free? Comment number 1 if this injustice resonates with your own experiences. Hit that like button if you're eager to see Marcus finally receive the recognition he deserves. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of courage against systemic discrimination. Will Marcus be able to prevent disaster at the demonstration, or is it already too late? The clock is ticking, and lives hang in the balance as we continue this powerful story. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the stark interrogation room where Marcus Washington sat perfectly still. His posture military straight despite hours of questioning designed to wear down his resistance and extract a confession to crimes he hadn't committed. The security officer across the table shuffled through documents with theatrical deliberation, occasionally sliding photographs toward Marcus, images of him accessing restricted areas, working in the fabrication shop, meeting with Dr. Chin and Elijah in supposedly clandestine conversations. Industrial espionage carries a minimum 10-year federal sentence, the officer stated flatly. Unauthorized access to classified military technology, theft of intellectual property, sabotage of critical defense systems. The evidence is overwhelming, Mr. Washington. Marcus regarded the man with the same steady gaze that had faced down enemy fire in 2 wars. What you call sabotage was an attempt to prevent catastrophic failure in a compromised system. The intellectual property being stolen is mine, not the government's. And the only crime here is the systematic discrimination that's allowed dangerous design flaws to persist because expertise is judged by the color of one's skin rather than the content of one's knowledge. The security officer's expression revealed nothing as he made another note in his file. Your personal grievances aren't relevant to this investigation. We have documented evidence of security violations that would be prosecutable regardless of the perpetrator's race or background. Before Marcus could respond, the door opened to admit General Rivera, her uniform immaculate, her expression leaving no doubt about her authority or her anger. This interrogation is concluded. Sergeant Washington is released to my custody immediately. The security officer began to object, citing protocols and jurisdiction, but Rivera cut him off with surgical precision. This facility operates under Joint Chiefs Directive 37 Alpha, which places all personnel and security operations under military authority during active weapons testing. As the ranking military officer present, I am exercising emergency oversight powers. Unless you'd prefer to explain to the Secretary of Defense why you obstructed a critical national security operation, I suggest you process Sergeant Washington's release. Now. The bureaucratic shields that had protected Whitfield's actions crumbled before Rivera's invocation of authorities few civilian administrators understood well enough to challenge. Within minutes, Marcus was walking free, though the confiscated components that could save the Sentinel program remained in security lockup, classified as evidence. As they strode through the corridor toward the main testing area, Rivera briefed Marcus on developments during his detention. Pierce announced a breakthrough solution 2 hours ago. They're implementing modifications to the mounting system based on partial information gleaned from your confiscated designs. Congressional representatives are already assembling for the demonstration scheduled to begin in 40 minutes. Marcus's concern deepened with each detail. Without proper implementation of the stress distribution elements, those modifications could create new failure points even worse than the original problem. They're creating a ticking time bomb. Their urgent conversation was interrupted by Dr. Chin, who approached rapidly from a side corridor, tablet in hand. They've misinterpreted your solution completely, she explained breathlessly, showing Marcus the implementation specifications. The reinforcement brackets are being installed at incorrect angles, creating stress concentration points that will magnify the harmonic vibrations instead of dampening them. Elijah joined them moments later, his maintenance uniform allowing him access to areas now restricted to most technical staff. They've accelerated the test protocol, he reported. Full power demonstration in 30 minutes. With the congressional delegation and military leadership in the observation bay directly adjacent to the test chamber. The implications were immediately clear to all four. A catastrophic failure at full power could send shrapnel through the observation windows, potentially injuring or killing high-ranking officials. Marcus needed to prevent the test, but his credibility had been systematically destroyed through Whitfield's campaign of discreditation and Pierce's appropriation of his partial solution. I need to speak with the test director immediately, Marcus insisted. Without proper implementation of the complete solution, that engine will fail catastrophically at 80% power. Rivera nodded grimly. I'll get you there, but be prepared for resistance. Pierce has convinced everyone that your interventions are motivated by personal grievance rather than legitimate safety concerns. Their progress toward the test chamber was halted by security personnel who informed them that Marcus remained barred from the testing area despite his release from detention. Direct order from Dr. Whitfield, countersigned by the facility director, the guard explained apologetically to General Rivera. Even your authority is insufficient without Pentagon override. As they debated their next move, a new development shifted the dynamics unexpectedly. Congressman Harold Freeman, ranking member of the Armed Services Committee and a Vietnam veteran himself, approached with his aides in tow. General Rivera, he acknowledged with professional courtesy before turning his attention to Marcus. "And you must be Sergeant Washington. Your reputation precedes you." Marcus straightened instinctively at being addressed by his military rank rather than the dismissive Mr. Whitfield preferred. "Congressman Freeman." "I wasn't aware my reputation had reached your office." Freeman's expression remained neutral, but his eyes conveyed an evaluative intelligence that missed nothing. When someone spends 30 years solving problems others can't, word gets around. Particularly when those solutions save American lives in combat situations. He gestured toward a private conference room nearby. "I'd appreciate your perspective on the Sentinel program before the demonstration begins. Strictly off the record, of course." This unexpected development created an opening that circumvented Whitfield's barricades. Within the privacy of the conference room, Marcus explained the fundamental issues with the engine configuration, the dangerous shortcuts introduced by Pierce, and the potentially catastrophic consequences of the current implementation. Freeman listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, but offering neither agreement nor dismissal until Marcus had finished. "So you're telling me," the congressman summarized, "that the demonstration scheduled to begin in 15 minutes poses a significant safety risk to everyone in that observation bay, including 6 members of Congress and 3 general officers?" "Yes, sir," Marcus confirmed without hesitation. "At approximately 80% power, the modified mounting system will experience harmonic vibration beyond structural tolerances. The resulting failure would be explosive, with high-velocity metal fragments as the primary danger." Freeman studied Marcus for a long moment before reaching a decision. "I once watched a young sergeant rebuild a helicopter transmission using parts from a damaged Jeep somewhere north of Pleiku. Saved 16 lives that day, including mine. Never did get that sergeant's name, but I've never forgotten what he taught me about recognizing expertise regardless of rank or education." Without further explanation, Freeman left the room, moving with purpose toward the test director's station. Minutes later, word spread that the demonstration protocol had been modified to include enhanced safety measures and power limitations at the congressman's insistence. While this development might prevent immediate catastrophe, it wouldn't solve the underlying problems with the Sentinel's design. Marcus needed to implement his complete solution. Not the corrupted version Pierce was attempting to claim as his own. As the modified demonstration began, Marcus watched from a monitoring station outside the main test chamber. Tension evident in every line of his body as the power levels rose incrementally. At 60%, the vibration patterns already showed warning signs that the test engineers, focused on software readings rather than mechanical indicators, were missing or misinterpreting. Through secure channels, Dr. Chen relayed Marcus's observations to allies within the test team, creating a shadow monitoring system that provided real-time assessment of the mounting system's deterioration. When the power level approached 75%, the reduced maximum under Freeman's modified protocol, multiple warning indicators began flashing across control monitors. The test director hesitated, glancing toward Pierce, who stood among the observers, nodding confidently for the test to continue. "Thermal readings in the mounting assembly are exceeding design parameters," one engineer reported uncertainly. "Pressure fluctuations in the coolant system as well," added another. Pierce stepped forward, his voice carrying the practiced authority that had defined his career. "These are expected variations during the transition phase. The system will stabilize at sustained power," continued the demonstration. Marcus watched in growing alarm as the vibration pattern shifted into the danger zone he had predicted. Through Dr. Chen's relay, he sent urgent warnings that were increasingly difficult for the test team to ignore as their own instruments confirmed his projections. At 78% power, a metallic groan emanated from the engine compartment, audible even through the reinforced observation windows. Warning lights cascaded across control panels as automated safety systems detected multiple threshold violations simultaneously. "Emergency shutdown recommended," the lead engineer announced. Fingers poised over the cutoff switch. Pierce moved to intervene. override the automated warnings. This is a known transition phenomenon that will resolve once we reach stable operation. The engineer looked toward Whitfield for confirmation, professional training warring with political pressure in the moment of decision. Before Whitfield could respond, Congressman Freeman spoke from his position among the observers. "Son, I believe your instruments are telling you something important. I suggest you listen to them rather than to administrators with no skin in the game." The simple statement, delivered with the moral authority of combat experience and political power, broke the spell of intimidation that had paralyzed the engineering team. The test director initiated emergency shutdown protocols immediately, power levels dropping rapidly as coolant systems engaged at maximum capacity to reduce thermal stress. Marcus exhaled slowly, relief mixing with frustration. Disaster had been temporarily averted. But the fundamental problems remained unsolved, his complete solution still locked away as evidence, while Pierce's corrupted implementation threatened future testing. As the demonstration concluded in technical failure but without physical catastrophe, the political dynamics shifted dramatically. Congressional representatives demanded explanations for the discrepancy between promised performance and observed results. Military leadership questioned the viability of the entire program given persistent engineering challenges. And in this environment of intensified scrutiny, the systematic discrimination and intellectual theft that had defined the project could no longer remain hidden behind security classifications and institutional silence. The reckoning had begun. But its outcome remained uncertain as powerful interests maneuvered to protect reputations and careers built on decades of appropriated innovation. For Marcus Washington, vindication remained tantalizingly close yet still beyond reach, the truth emerging into light, but not yet fully acknowledged or addressed. The next hours would determine whether justice would finally prevail, or whether the patterns of the past would once again reassert themselves at the expense of both individual dignity and national security. Alarm klaxons shattered the tense silence that had fallen over the Armstrong facility following the aborted demonstration, their urgent wailing signaling an emergency situation in the main testing bay. Marcus Washington's head snapped up at the sound, years of combat experience triggering an immediate response as he sprinted toward the source of the alarm, General Rivera and Dr. Chin following close behind. Security barriers that had previously blocked his access now stood unmanned as personnel rushed to respond to the escalating crisis. The scene that greeted them in the testing bay verged on chaos, engineers shouting contradictory instructions, warning lights flashing across control panels, and the ominous sound of metal under extreme stress emanating from the Sentinel prototype. Despite the emergency shutdown initiated during the demonstration, the engine had entered a dangerous feedback loop, power levels fluctuating unpredictably as automated systems fought against the mechanical failures Marcus had predicted. "What happened?" Rivera demanded of the nearest technician, her voice cutting through the cacophony with military precision. The young woman's face was pale with stress as she responded, "Dr. Pierce ordered a system restart immediately after shutdown. He said the demonstration failure was just a software glitch that could be reset. But when they brought the power back up, something went wrong with the cooling system. Now we can't shut it down, the control software is locked up completely." Marcus pushed his way to the main monitoring station where the test director was frantically attempting to regain control of the failing systems. One glance at the diagnostic displays confirmed his worst fears. The improper implementation of his partial solution had created exactly the catastrophic stress pattern he had warned against, now exacerbated by Pierce's reckless restart order. "Where's Pierce now?" Marcus asked, scanning the room for the man responsible for this dangerous situation. "Evacuated with the congressional delegation," the test director replied bitterly, "along with Whitfield and most of the senior staff. We're trying to implement emergency cooling protocols, but nothing's responding. Manual overrides are non-functional." Marcus quickly assessed the situation, his decades of hands-on experience allowing him to see beyond the flashing warnings to the mechanical reality beneath. The mounting system was failing progressively, each stress fracture transferring load to remaining connection points, accelerating the cascade toward catastrophic failure. Temperatures in the engine compartment were approaching critical levels that would soon trigger an automatic fire suppression system, one that would be woefully inadequate against the metal fire that would result from complete failure. How many people still in the facility? He asked Rivera, already calculating evacuation priorities against response options. Approximately 75. She replied grimly. Full evacuation would take at least 15 minutes given the security protocols. Marcus shook his head. We don't have 15 minutes. That mounting system will fail completely within 7, maybe 8 minutes. When it does, the main fuel lines will rupture, with temperatures already above ignition threshold. We're looking at an explosion that could breach containment barriers. Dr. Chen had been analyzing the software interface, her fingers flying across keyboards as she attempted to bypass the locked control systems. The automated safety protocols are being overridden by some kind of executive command loop. I can't break through from here. We need physical access to the main control junction inside the engine compartment. The implications were immediately clear to everyone present. Someone would need to enter the engine bay with the system still running, exposing themselves to extreme heat, toxic chemicals, and the very real possibility of being present when the catastrophic failure occurred. Without hesitation, Marcus began removing his jacket. Get me a heat shield and breathing apparatus. I'll need to access the control junction directly. Rivera grabbed his arm. That's a suicide mission, Sergeant. The temperature in there is over 300 degrees and rising. With proper equipment, I can tolerate it long enough, Marcus countered. I'm the only one who knows exactly where the control junction is located and how to implement the manual override. There's no time to talk someone else through it. While emergency equipment was located, Elijah appeared at Marcus's side, having navigated through maintenance corridors to reach the crisis center. I found these in the security lockup, he said quietly, handing over the custom components Marcus had fabricated before his detention. Thought they might be useful. Marcus examined the precision machine parts with grim satisfaction. More than useful. If I can get to the mounting assembly after shutting down the engine, these could prevent a recurrence when the system cools. Suited in protective gear designed for hazardous materials response but poorly adapted for the current crisis. Marcus prepared to enter the engine compartment. Dr. Chen provided last-minute guidance on the software override sequence needed once he reached the control junction. While Rivera cleared remaining personnel from the immediate danger zone, establishing a perimeter that might offer minimal protection if the worst occurred. 7 minutes until catastrophic failure. Based on current deterioration rates, Chen reported as final preparations were completed. Once inside, you'll have approximately 90 seconds before heat exposure reaches dangerous levels. Even with the protective gear. Marcus nodded, his expression betraying no fear despite the potential sacrifice he was about to make. If I'm not out in 5 minutes, complete the evacuation regardless of system status. No heroics, no waiting. Clear? Rivera's acknowledgement was professional but tinged with emotion she rarely displayed. Crystal clear, Sergeant. Good hunting. The heat struck Marcus like a physical blow as he entered the engine compartment, superheated air searing his lungs despite the breathing apparatus. Visibility was severely limited by both the protective visor and the shimmering heat waves rising from the malfunctioning engine core. Navigation required touch as much as sight. His gloved hands moving across superstructure components with practiced precision despite the punishing conditions. Reaching the control junction required navigating through a narrow access channel clearly designed for maintenance robots rather than human technicians. The space barely wide enough for his shoulders even without the bulky protective gear. Sweat poured down his face inside the helmet. The temperature display on his suit showing external readings approaching 350 degrees, well beyond the gear's design specifications for sustained exposure. The control junction. When he finally reached it, showed obvious signs of Pierce's hasty modifications, non-standard connections and improvised wiring, creating a vulnerability that had allowed the software lockup when emergency protocols activated. Following Chen's instructions, Marcus disconnected the primary control relay, bypassing the corrupted software to initiate a true emergency shutdown that couldn't be overridden by automated systems or remote commands. As the engine began powering down, alarms throughout the facility shifted tone, indicating decreasing rather than increasing danger levels. But Marcus knew the crisis wasn't truly over once the system cooled. The same fundamental flaws would remain unless properly addressed. With the immediate danger of explosion receding, he made a crucial decision to extend his time in the lethal environment, turning his attention to the failing mounting assembly that had triggered the crisis. Working with the precision that had defined his career, Marcus began installing the custom components he had fabricated earlier, each precisely fitted piece distributing stress away from failure points and reinforcing the overall structural integrity of the system. The protective suit was beginning to fail under the extreme conditions, heat seeping through compromised seams as temperature sensors flashed urgent warnings. Pain became his constant companion as exposed skin blistered from radiant heat, yet his hands remained steady, completing the installation with textbook perfection despite the increasingly unbearable conditions. In the control room, the monitoring team watched in astonishment as diagnostic readings began shifting from critical failure indicators toward operational parameters. "The mounting stress is redistributing," Chen reported incredulously. "The vibration pattern is stabilizing across the primary support structure." Time had lost meaning for Marcus as he completed the final adjustments. His world narrowed to the essential task of ensuring each component was perfectly positioned and secured. Only when the last connection was tightened did he allow himself to acknowledge the increasingly desperate communications coming through his headset. Rivera's voice commanding him to evacuate immediately as his suit's life support systems approached complete failure. The return journey through the access channel proved far more challenging than the entry had been, his strength fading as heat exhaustion and oxygen deprivation took their toll. Twice he stopped, darkness encroaching on his vision, only to force himself forward through sheer determination. When he finally emerged from the engine compartment, he collapsed immediately. Emergency medical personnel rushing forward to remove the compromised protective gear and begin treatment for severe heat exposure and potential respiratory damage. From his position on the emergency gurney, Marcus could see the monitoring stations where engineers stared in disbelief at diagnostic readings showing the Sentinel's systems returning to stable operation parameters. The crisis had been averted not through the sophisticated algorithms and theoretical models that had dominated the program, but through the practical expertise and physical courage of a man the system had repeatedly dismissed and undervalued. As consciousness began to fade, Marcus heard Elijah's voice nearby, explaining to the engineering team exactly what modifications had been implemented and why they worked. The young man spoke with the confidence of genuine understanding, translating Marcus's practical innovation into the technical language the engineers respected. In that moment, despite his physical pain, Marcus felt a profound satisfaction, not just in solving the immediate crisis, but in witnessing the beginning of a transition as expertise was finally recognized regardless of its source or the credentials of its provider. The last thing he heard before darkness claimed him was General Rivera's voice, not addressed to him but to the assembled technical staff and the returning officials who had fled the crisis they helped create. "Gentlemen," she stated with unmistakable authority, "I believe we've just witnessed the difference between theoretical knowledge and practical wisdom. When you've finished implementing Sergeant Washington's complete solution, we should discuss appropriate credit for the innovations that will save this program, and long overdue recognition for the man who just risked his life to compensate for your failures." 3 months after the near-catastrophic failure of the Sentinel prototype, Marcus Washington stood at the podium in the Armstrong facility's main auditorium. The same room where Franklin Pierce had once claimed credit for innovations that weren't his own. The audience before him represented a striking contrast to that earlier gathering, a diverse assembly of engineers, military personnel, congressional representatives, and most significantly, young faces from universities and technical schools across the country, invited specifically for this historic announcement. Marcus adjusted the microphone. His hands still bearing the faint scars from thermal burns sustained during his emergency intervention, permanent reminders of sacrifice that could no longer be overlooked or dismissed. The Washington platform, he began, the name itself representing the first acknowledgement of his contributions in a career spanning decades, represents more than a mechanical solution to complex engineering challenges. It embodies a recognition that innovation comes from many sources, that expertise wears many faces, and that our national security depends on recognizing excellence wherever it appears. The investigation launched in the wake of the Sentinel crisis had revealed patterns of discrimination and intellectual theft extending far beyond Marcus's personal experience. Forensic accounting and document analysis had uncovered dozens of instances where peers had systematically appropriated innovations from minority engineers and technicians, building his reputation and fortune on work that originated with others. The resulting scandal had forced Pierce's resignation and triggered a comprehensive review of patent applications and credit attributions across multiple defense programs. Whitfield had similarly been removed from his position after evidence emerged of his deliberate efforts to sideline qualified minority candidates for advancement, while fast-tracking less qualified individuals who matched his preconceptions of what an engineer should look like. His replacement as project director, Dr. Sarah Chin, now sat in the front row, her promotion representing one small step toward addressing the systemic inequities that had pervaded the facility. Today's announcement, Marcus continued, goes beyond renaming a technical specification or acknowledging a single contribution. The Washington Engineering Initiative represents a fundamental commitment to recognizing and developing talent across our entire population, ensuring that no brilliant mind is overlooked because of race, gender, or educational background. The initiative, funded through congressional action championed by Representative Freeman, would establish mentorship programs, alternative credentialing pathways, and targeted recruitment efforts designed to diversify the engineering core responsible for America's defense technology. Most significantly, it would implement new attribution and credit-sharing protocols to ensure that innovations were properly traced to their original creators regardless of rank or position. General Rivera stepped forward to join Marcus at the podium, her presence underscoring the military's commitment to the initiative. Sergeant Washington could have chosen bitterness after decades of having his contributions minimized or attributed to others, she observed. Instead, he chose to channel his experience into creating opportunities for others who might otherwise face the same barriers. That transformation of personal injustice into systemic improvement represents the highest ideals of service. As Rivera spoke, Marcus caught sight of Elijah seated among the senior engineering staff, his maintenance uniform replaced by the professional attire of his new position as Assistant Director for Talent Development. The young man had become the first beneficiary of the initiative's alternative advancement pathway, his practical knowledge and formal education finally receiving the recognition they deserved. The ceremony continued with the official designation of the Sentinel's revolutionary propulsion system as the Washington Platform, permanently associating Marcus's name with the innovation he had conceived decades earlier and recently saved from catastrophic failure. More meaningful than this symbolic recognition, however, was the establishment of comprehensive review procedures to identify and properly credit other overlooked innovators whose contributions had been similarly misattributed or unacknowledged. For Marcus, the most profound moment came not during the official proceedings but afterward, as he made his way through the facility toward the small workshop that had been established for his ongoing consulting role. In corridors where he had once been viewed with suspicion and disdain, engineers and technicians now stopped to express gratitude and respect, many requesting his insights on technical challenges they faced. Upon reaching his workshop, he found it unexpectedly occupied, a diverse group of young engineers waiting with notebooks and questions, seeking wisdom that textbooks and simulation models couldn't provide. A young woman stepped forward, introducing herself as a mechanical engineering student from Howard University, the same institution that had educated Elijah. "We heard you'd be here today, sir," she explained, her expression conveying determination and hope in equal measure. "We were hoping you might show us how you identified the mounting stress issue that everyone else missed." Marcus surveyed the eager faces before him, recognizing in them the same passion for problem-solving that had defined his own career despite the obstacles placed in his path. In that moment, he understood that his true legacy wouldn't be found in renamed technologies or historical corrections, important as those were. It would live in the minds and hands of these young innovators who would now have opportunities he had been denied, whose talents would be recognized rather than overlooked or appropriated. "Pull up a chair," he invited them, moving toward the workbench where a training model of the engine component waited. "Let me show you what 40 years of hands-on experience teaches you to see that textbooks can't explain." As he began demonstrating the subtle indicators of stress patterns that sophisticated instruments often missed, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The discrimination he had faced throughout his career had never been fully erased by this belated recognition, the injustices never truly compensated. But in creating pathways for others to avoid similar experiences, in ensuring that future innovations would be properly attributed regardless of their source, he had transformed personal vindication into lasting change. That transformation, more than any technical achievement, represented his greatest contribution, a legacy not just of mechanical solutions but of institutional improvement, not just of personal recognition but of systemic reform. The Washington platform would power the next generation of defense technology. But the Washington Initiative would empower the next generation of diverse innovators whose contributions would no longer be silenced or stolen. In this workshop filled with eager minds unbounded by the limitations that had constrained his own career, Marcus Washington had finally found the acknowledgement that mattered most, not in accolades or renamed technologies, but in the opportunity to ensure that the barriers he had faced would not stand in the path of those who followed. Has this story of perseverance against discrimination resonated with your own experiences or observations? Comment below with a time you've witnessed someone's contributions being overlooked because of who they are rather than the quality of their work. If you believe in recognizing excellence regardless of its source, hit that like button to support stories that highlight these important issues. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that challenge us to create more inclusive environments where everyone's talents can be recognized. And please share this story with someone who needs to hear that justice, though often delayed, is still worth fighting for. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Your support makes these stories possible. Marcus Washington's journey teaches us that true excellence transcends credentials, race, and background. His story illuminates how systemic discrimination can rob society of brilliant innovations while denying deserving individuals their rightful recognition. In a world that often values credentials over capability, Marcus reminds us that practical wisdom born from experience can solve problems that theoretical knowledge alone cannot address. The story reveals how discrimination operates subtly through exclusion, credit theft, and institutional barriers that seem procedural but serve to maintain existing power structures. It shows how those facing such barriers must be twice as good just to be acknowledged, carrying burdens others never experience. Perhaps most importantly, Marcus demonstrates that the greatest response to injustice isn't merely seeking personal vindication, but creating systemic change that lifts others. By transforming his decades of exclusion into opportunities for future generations, he created a legacy far greater than any technical innovation. This narrative challenges us to examine our own environments. Whose voices are we silencing? Whose contributions go uncredited? What brilliance might we be missing by listening only to those who match our preconceptions of what expertise looks like? True progress requires not just recognizing individual cases of discrimination, but rebuilding systems to ensure talent is valued regardless of its source. Has this story touched something in your own experience? Perhaps you've witnessed someone's contributions being overlooked because of who they are rather than the quality of their work. Or maybe you've been Marcus Washington yourself, fighting for recognition in a system designed to overlook your talents. Share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters in this conversation. If you believe in recognizing excellence regardless of its source, hit that like button to support stories that highlight these important issues. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that shine light on the hidden heroes whose contributions shape our world despite the barriers they face. And please share this story with someone who needs to hear that justice, though often delayed, is still worth fighting for. Whether they're struggling against discrimination or in a position to change the systems that perpetuate it, this message needs to reach them. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery and transformation. Together, we can build a world where brilliance is recognized in all its diverse forms.